You know what? After looking at Joe Biden's record, I wouldn't see the point in putting him in office. We already got Trump. Okay, why would we need to swap out Trump for a Biden? And it's not like Joe Biden has done anything positive for the Black community. He doesn't have that track record, ladies and gentlemen. Neither does Trump. So why swap out one racist for another? Just keep the one you know in there. I am deeply opposed to Joe Biden even running for president. I think Joe Biden is completely unsuitable. Barack Obama, remember, shared many things in common with Joe Biden. And one of the main things they had in common was they both hated the Black community. Obama sat in office for 2 terms and did nothing for people that voted for him. 95%, 90% of Black America voted for Obama, and Obama gave us nothing in return. So, the way I see it, Joe, us opposing you, you can't even run to get Obama to try to get the Black people to see you differently because he don't have that influence. Obama has pretty much hurt the chances of any more Black candidates running for office. And I know you're not a Black man, but everything you've done in your career screams anti-Black. And we should never lose sight of that. Now, the Congressional Black Caucus, some of them are for Biden, but we are not influenced by what the Congressional Black Caucus really believes. We don't care what they believe, and we don't care who they would vote for. They're not for us anyway. They haven't pushed not one piece of legislation to improve the Black community, and they're never going to, ladies and gentlemen. So let's get into Joe Biden. Joe Biden has a very ugly track record when it comes down to race, and he was a very vocal senator from Delaware. And believe it or not, there are many in Delaware, ladies and gentlemen, that think just like Joe Biden, even to this day. How do I feel about him? I feel nothing. But it is good that we know as much as possible about these people that are running for president. Now, the question of reparations, after listening, I've just listened to his past. And I think the question of reparations, Joe Biden would never be for reparations because he pushed too many bills that kept divisions going. So that should pretty much tell you where he would stand on reparations. Biden wants state mandated school integration, the most racist concept you can come up with. So I'm going to go down to something that Joe Biden said. Joe Biden said African American felons as predators, too sociopathic to rehabilitate. Well, I find that very interesting, Joe Biden, because I think you're too racist to rehabilitate. And we should never even consider voting for you for that reason. As of this writing, the plurality of Black Democrats want him to be their party's 2020 nominee. And I say to those Democrats, you can all kiss my ass. You will not have a say in who Black people vote for. Whether Biden can retain that support after voters learn more about his problematic past could very well determine the outcome of the party's primary race. Now, Joe Biden really can't use Obama to save him now. He really can't. Obama can't save him. Most of the black community don't even want to listen to Obama. Biden helped kill the most effective policy for improving black educational attainment that America has ever known. Now, there was a question for desegregating America's schools, and initially Biden was for this until his white constituents had an issue with it and they didn't want it. So the moment he realized that his white constituents did not like the idea of desegregation, he shift gears. So once trying to talk up desegregation, he then turned his back on it. So as he started campaigning and as everything started progressing, Joe Biden got white lash from his constituents, arguing that forced busing was appropriate for the South. For the North, they're saying it was not necessary to desegregate by busing in the North, which is bullshit. The North is so racist, it's not even funny. But they have managed to try to put all of the racist stigmatism on the South. And I'm telling you, it's a bunch of bullshit. It really is. So once the Senate, Biden continued to triangulate voting for the most, not all, the anti-busing amendment that came before him. Okay. So Biden joined his racist colleague, Jesse Helms, in voting to kneecap all federal efforts to integrate schools everywhere in the country. That's what good old Joe did. Specifically, Biden voted to bar the Department of Health, Education, and Welfare from requiring schools to provide information on the racial makeup of their student bodies, therefore making it nigh impossible for Uncle Sam to withhold federal funds from school districts that refuse to integrate. The measure was rejected nonetheless. Biden persisted, and his cowardly example inspired other self professed liberals to throw racial justice under the bus. So they were no different than Biden. All right, so Joe had proposed his own amendment for $36 billion education bill, stipulating that none of those federal funds could be used by school systems to assign teachers or students to schools for reasons of race. His amendment would prevent some faceless bureaucrat from deciding that any black or white child should fit in some predetermined ratio. So Biden had his version of the bill for education, and it actually, he got it pushed, and it was an anti-bus busing type bill, and it got 50 to 43 votes, giving Biden a victory. The NAACP called Biden's proposal an anti-Black amendment. The Senate sold African American member Ed Brooks called it the greatest symbolic defeat for civil rights since 1964. But Biden helped his fellow liberals reconcile themselves to the wrong side of history by recasting integrationalists, um, integrationists as the real racists. And good old Joe said this: the new integration plans being offered are really just quota systems to assure a certain number of Blacks and Chicanos or whatever in each school. That to me is the most racist concept you can come up with, Biden said in 1975, interviewed recently on Earth by the Washington Post. What it says is in order for your child with curly black hair, brown eyes, and dark skin to be able to learn anything, he needs to sit next to my blonde haired, blue eyed son. That's racist. Well, Joe, we don't need to sit next to your kids in order to learn. Okay. We really seriously don't. Many of you are coming up cheating through the school systems. I guess you just didn't remember adding that into your bills, right? Biden echoed in his remarks to NPR that same year, saying, I think the concept of busing, that we are going to integrate people so that they all have the same access, they all learn to grow up with one another, and all the rest is a rejection of the whole movement of Black pride, a rejection of the entire Black awareness concept, where Black is beautiful, Black culture should be studied, and the cultural awareness of the importance of their own identity, their own individuality. Joe don't care about them things, y'all. I don't care about that. As of 2007, Biden believed that his stance had aged well. The memoir released that year, the soon-to-be presidential candidate derided busing as a liberal train wreck. Education experts disagree. Since some municipalities did integrate their schools through busing, however, temporarily, while others did not, scholars have been able to evaluate the policy efficiency. And in 2011, researchers at Berkeley found that Black students who had spent 5 years in desegregated schools went on to earn, on average, 25% more than those who remained in segregated schools. Okay. The rationale for integration is not, as Biden suggested, that Black kids need to sit next to blonde haired, blue eyed ones in order to retain information. Rather, that it is that in a racially stratified society, overwhelmingly African American schools will almost inevitably be sites of concentrated poverty, underinvestment, and relatively low capital. Um, Biden never ceased expressing his concern for Black children's inadequate educational opportunities. Yeah, but you didn't do anything to help it. Okay. You did not, remember, you did not want your blonde hair, blue eyed child sitting next to someone Black. So never forget that about Joe Biden. Now, Joe Biden worked his fingers to the bone to make sure the criminal injustice system looked the way that it does today in 2019. He is very much responsible for mandatory minimums and the fact that all of these non-violent drug offense arrests are going rampant around the country. And it's overwhelmingly putting Black men in prison. You ain't in there for no most violent crimes. You are in there because of mandatory minimums and non-violent drug offenses. That's why you're in there. And Joe Biden had everything to do with that. It is hard to name an infamous unjust feature of America's criminal justice system that Joe Biden didn't help to bring about. Mandatory minimum sentences for nonviolent drug offenders, the sentencing disparity between crack and powder cocaine, civil asset forfeiture, and extensive use of the death penalty. The Delaware senator was involved in establishing them all. So, the mass incarceration that we see to this very day, you can pat old Joe on the back for the whole thing. He is 100% responsible for it. Biden was famous for his lead role in crafting the 1994 crime bill, or as the senator preferred to call it, as recently as 2015, the 1994 Biden crime bill. Some aspects of that legislation remain popular within the Democratic Party. Among them, the Violence Against Women Act, a federal assault weapons ban, and funds for community-oriented policing. In the 2019 America, a place where our nation's violent crime rate is near historic low, while its incarceration hovers around world historic highs. Remember, America incarcerates more of its people than anyone on the face of the earth. And Joe Biden was absolutely fine with the whole thing. As a result of these policies and many others, the United States imprisons a high proportion of its population today than any other developed country. This is not because Americans commit more crimes. Victimization rates in America are comparable to those in Western Europe. Rather, it's because we impose harsher sentences on convicts than any other nation deems conscionable. So in America, when you go to court, America believes in enforcing the most harshest sentences, especially on Black men. And that's exactly what we see today. And for the bulk of his political career, Joe Biden made mandating such sentences one of his defining causes. As a high ranking member of the Senate Judiciary Committee, Biden didn't just craft the 1994 crime bill, which kicked off mass incarceration even more. He also ushered a variety of other draconian measures into law. As with busing, Biden leaned left on criminal justice early in his career. In 1981, he criticized Republicans for pushing longer sentence for non-violent offenders. Now, you want to know why somebody with weed is in there for 25 years? You can thank Joe Biden and the Republicans of those times for pushing those kind of bills, which are impacting us today. In 1981, he criticized Republicans for pushing longer sentences for nonviolent offenders when prisons were already overcrowded. But as with busing, Biden was one of the first liberals to discern the rightward shift in public opinion on criminal justice, and quite possibly the most enthusiastic convert to the gospel of law and order liberalism. During the 1980s, Biden helped pass laws reinstating the federal death penalty, abolishing federal parole, increasing penalties for marijuana possession. And I hope I'm waking you up. I hope I'm waking you up. Expanding the use of civil asset forfeiture and establishing a 100-to-1 sentencing disparity for possession of crack cocaine used disproportionately by poor non-white people and powder cocaine used disproportionately by rich white people. Joe Biden was all for harsher sentences given to men, specifically black men, that had crack cocaine, and lighter sentences going to white males on cocaine. Biden was behind the whole thing. Biden's support for these measures wasn't a wholly offense responsive to public outrage over violent crimes. Rather, it was a proactive effort to capitalize on electric, increasingly draconian mood. In 1989, George H.W. Bush gave a national address outlining his plans to ramp up the war on drugs. Biden delivered the Democratic response and savaged the Republicans' plan to drastically increase incarceration for drug crimes from the right. Quite frankly, the president's plan is not tough enough. This is what Joe is saying. Bold enough or imaginative enough to meet the crisis at hand. Biden told the American people, in a nutshell, the president's plan does not include enough police officers to catch the violent thugs, even though prosecutors to convict them, enough judges to sentence them, or enough prison cells to put them away for a long time. See, this is what Joe Biden spent his career doing. He spent his career sitting around trying to make sure the harshest punishments always went on the Black community. That's what this man did. Okay. 4 years later, Biden remained at a cutting edge of law and order liberalism. In a Senate floor speech recently spotlighted by CNN's K File, Biden raised awareness of the mythical threat posed by super predators. So that was a Democratic thing, calling us super predators. We know Hillary said it too. And rising generation of inner city children so comprehensively failed by their parents and society, they had developed into incurable sociopaths. Now he's saying this once again, whom the state could quarantine but never rehabilitated. So what he's saying is, we come from these parents that have failed us and society, and black people, they can't be rehabilitated. Well, Joe, there's many that argue that many races can never be rehabilitated, like you. There is cadre of young people, tens of thousands of them, born out of wedlock, without parents, without supervision, without any structure, without any conscious developing, because they literally have not been socialized. Well, I tell you what, and I'm going to say this to all of you listening. There's nothing but violence across this world. I don't care what country you point to on the map, they're violent. So if this world is socialized, all I can say is you've done a poor job in socializing the earth, because this earth is extremely bloody and violent. And it's been this way for thousands of years. And so if you are so good at socializing the world, then you've done a poor job. That's all I have to say. You've done an extremely poor job socializing the world. For all of you that believe you've civilized the world and done all this great stuff, I'm here telling you, you've done a shitty ass job. Violence everywhere. They literally have not had an opportunity, Biden explained. Then he urged his colleagues to support aid to such youth now, or else they would become the predators 15 years from now. You know, it's amazing, Joe. You see predators in everybody except for people that look like you. I guess you don't see no predators around you, despite the fact that we see all this mass shooting coming out of your community, but you don't see that as predators, right? Get the fuck out of here. Okay. As for the already existing predators, they are beyond the pale of many of those people, beyond the pale, Biden says. We have no choice but to take them out of society. Yeah, I wonder what would happen if everything flipped, Joe. I got this feeling that crime would overwhelmingly drop on earth if we stop putting black men behind bars for petty crimes and start putting in, what if we put white men in there instead? Crime would actually drop in the world. The fact that you won't put your people in there that are doing wrong out here says it all. All it is going to contribute to more violence, because they already got in their mind, you're not going to punch me anyway. I can just do what I want. And that's exactly what's happening. So Joe seems to think the only people on earth that needs rehabilitating are black people. No one else in their communities where crime is being committed by people that look like them, they don't need that. No, not according to Joe. Man. The super predator proved to be a myth, but the specter of inner city teeming with irredeemable monsters and abandoned children help rationalize both mass incarceration and its racially inequitable character. That's all. And they're right. They only use those arguments, y'all, to justify mass incarceration. And that's exactly what happened. Uncle Joe says the darndest things. Beyond his role in perpetuating systematic racism, Biden has long displayed a penchant of political incorrectness. His suggestion that Barack Obama was the first clean and articulate African American to run for president is probably the most infamous of his gaffes. But the former vice president also told a crowd of black voters in 2012 that Mitt Romney would put you all back in chains. Y'all got to pardon me. Sometimes I just got to take a pause when I hear some of this stuff. But the former vice president also told a crowd of black voters that Mitt Romney, I'm going to repeat this again, would put you all back in chains. And has a habit of badly impersonating Indian convenience store clerks and call center employees. But Biden's most troubling racially tinge remarks might be those he does not regard as such. Specifically, the former BP has long boasted of his warm and often legislatively productive relationships with white supremacist Southern senators. I need a damn drink reading this thing. Wow. It's been around so long. I worked with James Eastland, Biden said, at the rally for Democratic Senate candidate Doug Jones in the fall of 2017. Even in the days when I got there, the Democratic Party still had 7 or 8 old-fashioned Democratic segregationists. You'd get up and you'd argue like the devil with them. Then you go down and have lunch or dinner with them. So, in other words, Joe, you knew they were segregationists, but you were never disturbed by that. That's all. You're just saying it in a different way. The political system worked. We were divided on issues, but the political system worked. Wow. Biden's sentiment read like a satire for nostalgia, for bipartisan comedy, laying bare to immorality and elitism, inherited to celebrating collegiality for its own sake. Needless to say, a political system in which a man who believes that his dark-skinned constituents belong to an inferior race and must be quarantined to their own institutions to prevent the mongrelization of the white race, was not the one that worked for said constituents. And Eastland isn't the only white supremacist Biden can't help expressing grudgingly admiration for. The Democratic frontrunner also warmingly eulogized Strom Thurmond at his funeral, in his instance on fondly recalling his relationship with Jesse Helms, who was another strong racist. Grates on even members of his own team who have told him as much, according to a recent report from the New York Times. Biden's faith in such senator entitlement to dignity and capacity for redemption stand in marked contrast to erstwhile views on rehabilitating predators and violent thugs. It makes my skin crawl hearing about this man. Okay, why Biden might as well win the Democratic nomination with strong African American support anyway. Late last month, Emerson College polled South Carolina Democrats on their preferences for the party's 2020 nominee among African American Democrats. There was little competition. Joe Biden boasted 43% of the demographic support. Well, you can't really go by them Negroes down there in South Carolina. Aren't they the same ones that wanted to forgave Dylan Roof? Enough for you down there on South Carolina. Man. Yeah, never forget that. They forgave Dylan Roof. Okay. His closest competitor, Bernie Sanders, claimed a mere 15%. Kamala Harris' support sat at 9%. Emerson's findings are consistent with broader national surveys of the 2020 primary, which consistently paint Biden as the front runner. thanks in no small part to his popularity among Black voters. Well, he's not popular to me. How do we reconcile Biden's considerable complicity in racial injustice with his inevitable popularity among his party's African American base? One answer is Biden's apparent strength in such voters. Illusory. The likely candidate is coasting off of his name recognition and association with Barack Obama. Once the primary campaign puts the history summarized above under the spotlight, along with Biden's myriad other heresies against progressivism, including his support for bankruptcy reforms that hurt low income consumers, his shoddy treatment of Anita Hill, and his advocacy for the Iraq War. Black voters will see through his malarkey. This is quite plausible. Well, some of us see through his bullshit right now. Okay. It's just somebody's tweet. I'm going to skip over all of them. Remedial tweet. I'm going over those tweets. Another explanation is that Black voters find Biden. Let me just go down a little. As for mass incarceration, the crack epidemic was truly a scourge. And even many African American community leaders embrace the logic of tough on crime in its wake. It also conceivably that some portions of Black Democratic primary voters agree to this day with Biden Clinton era views on criminal justice. A significant minority of African American Democrats identify as conservative and indicate a broadly positive view of the police. Well, I don't know who you're talking to, okay, where you're getting this positive view, but I can tell you, you are not talking to the actual people that are living around these rogue ass cops, you know. And I know how the media is in America. You're very picky and choosy about which Black people you select. They have to be of a certain type, or otherwise you don't even think they're worthy of having a voice. Okay. As in the case is so many African, I'm seeing, as in the case in so many American communities, the most prominent Black activist groups and public intellectuals tend to be both more ideological and more ideologically left wing than the median Black voter. The average American vote less on the basis of ideology than identity. Black Democrats identify strongly with Barack Obama, and Obama spent 8 years vouching for Biden's fitness for the high office. I don't care what Obama vouched for. Wow. Okay, so you can see right here, which label do you identify with as Republican? And it just got all there. And which do you identify? I don't really care. I don't really feel that either party has done right by the Black community, and I really don't care. I really don't care about either one. Regardless, in 2019, um, let me just go down. Meanwhile, thanks to conservative courts, busing is long dead issue of no contemporary political relevance. With the Democratic coalition, the forces of racial liberalism are unmistakably ascendant. Whether that coalition has someone accountable to it in the next White House will almost certainly do more to determine federal policy on civil rights than the question of precisely whom the Democratic someone is. And with most polls suggesting that Biden is Team Blue, most viable general election candidate, one can construct a perfectly rational argument for why Black voters and racial justice advocate should rally behind Uncle Joe. That said, given the size and quality of Democratic field and the severity of Biden's I um I ugh, ideological offenses, I don't know why I'm stuck by that word. I, for one, hope they conclude that he is unfit for rehabilitation, and I do too. I don't believe Joe Biden's track record warrants any Black person going out and voting for them. We already know Biden would never in a million years be for reparations. This man has showed throughout his entire political career, he has been a staunch racist and he has not changed one bit. And all he's going to do is get on that political trail, and it's going to be hard to ignore all of the racism coming from this man. His ideas are of yesterday. His racial attitude, let that shit stay in the background. We don't need this man. If I had to choose between Biden and Trump, I will take Trump. I will take Trump. Trump is an asshole. He's racist, but we already know this racist. Joe Biden is one of those liberal racists that needs to stay in the past. Why swap out one racist for another? Because that's all you would be doing between Biden and Trump. Screw Biden. Let Trump stay in there. I don't have no problem with Trump staying in there for another 4 years. Let Trump stay. I'm not for Joe Biden, and I never will be. I don't support this man. I don't believe in his ideology. I don't believe he deserves one Black person to leave their house and vote for him. Joe Biden, you kiss my ass. I'm going to speak against you every chance I get. Please leave your comment and subscribe. Don't forget to hit on the notification bell, and I'll see you on the next video. Peace, family.